Tiane, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for coming through.
Thank you for having me on your show.
It's one of the very few occasions when you are not in Parktown.
That's right. For the past year or so, I've been in Parktown most of the time.
Yeah. Why did you take on this job?
Well, when the Chief Justice said to me, why shouldn't you be the one to take this job? I appreciated that it was a very huge responsibility, and I thought that if the Chief Justice thought that I could do the job, I should take it. And it was also an opportunity to serve the country in a different capacity, and we should all be happy to serve the country.
Many people are happy that you are serving the country in this capacity. And some of the reasons people are giving, for example, is your patience. I have marveled watching you there over the last year, during some of those testimonies, where a normal mortal like me would have lost patience and walked out. You just stay there and you stay focused. How do you do that?
Well, I guess that the answer to that question in part must be maybe that's how I am. But also one's training as a lawyer and as a judge, you know, is to be patient with people, because sometimes they might have their own misconceptions about a forum such as a commission or a court. But also they have got other views, other things of, and other ways of doing things. And you are supposed to be patient. Obviously, you have got to draw a line somewhere. And I do draw a line. But I try by all means to be patient, give people a chance, but I do draw a line.
I just looking back, and I wonder if by today, after 1 year, do you get a sense that sometimes people have gone there, they've given evidence, all kinds of people, they're not really understanding, or there's a misunderstanding of corruption and the boundaries of what is the right thing to do or not. Do you think there's a kind of a misunderstanding about corruption, or people think it's a normal way of doing business today?
No, I put it this way. I think most of the time people know that corruption is wrong, and they know when it's corruption. There may be instances where it's borderline, but most of the time I think people know what corruption involves, and when they get involved in it, they get involved fully knowing, but hoping that there'll be no consequences. So yes, there have been cases where you get the impression that somebody thought this is corruption, but you can see it's not. But those are exceptions. Most of the time, people know what corruption involves.
Do you think some people have taken advantage of the platform just to say things that they want to say, you know, using the evidence opportunity to do that? I'm thinking here aloud, like the former President Jacob Zuma, when he gave his evidence, he spent quite some time, and you allowed him quite some time to talk about all kinds of things that were not really relevant to the issue at hand.
Well, I don't want to comment about his evidence or any particular witness's evidence, because I must wait until the whole, I've had all the evidence. But speaking generally, there may well be people who come and want to say certain things about people or in general. But from our side, we will want to make sure that as far as possible, what we hear falls within the terms of reference. Sometimes that is not immediately apparent in regard to certain evidence, and you have got to get the whole context before you can say whether it's in or outside of the terms of reference. But in the end, anyone who comes to the commission must know that for whatever they say about other people, there may come a time when they'll have to, their evidence will be tested. And right now, we are busy making plans to make sure that a lot of implicated persons come to the commission. Now, we have sent, for all implicated persons, we send what we call Rule 33 notices. That's notices that tell you, you are being implicated by this particular person who will give evidence at the commission on such and such a day. Here is his or her statement where it implicates you. You have a right to apply for leave to cross-examine that person and to come and give evidence yourself. But some decide not to do anything. I mean, we have given out more than 700 Rule 33 notices. That is the number of people who have been implicated. But many of those are not applying for leave to cross-examine and challenge evidence that has been given. But despite that, there are some that we will call and say, we see that you might not have applied for leave to cross-examine this person who is implicating you. But because of your position, either in government or in society, or because of the seriousness of the allegations of corruption, we want you to come and answer. So we will do that.
If they refuse, will you subpoena them?
Well, if we believe that they have information that is material, as would be the case if we want them to come, we will use our powers of compulsion, including issuing summons against them. It's summons that we issue, which compels them to appear. So in certain cases, we will do that. But our approach has been, as far as possible, to say, come. And if people cooperate, we allow them.
Nobody can argue about the dignity you've given to the Commission of Inquiry in terms of your approach that you've just, as one example, you've just mentioned now. But do you think sometimes when you're sitting there listening to how the evidence leaders are going through the motion, that maybe they could, it's not a court of law, it's a commission, but maybe they could push a little bit harder?
Well, that's a very important question you ask. And I think it's a question that gets raised from time to time by some people. I think what I need to explain is this. For many witnesses who have come before the commission, the evidence leaders didn't have any information or statements from anybody on the basis of which to ask certain questions to those witnesses. But when, for example, an implicated person comes, already the evidence leader has a statement from a previous witness who has implicated that person. Therefore, it's easier for the evidence leader to have a lot of questions to ask this one because there's a basis. But where nobody has put forward any statements against you, it's difficult for the evidence leader to go too far with questions because there must be a basis for questions. So there may be cases where people feel maybe the evidence leader should push hard, but maybe the limitation is that nobody has given evidence on the basis of which further questions can be asked.
But now there's been so much evidence given,
yes.
And according to Rule 33, you said
yes.
You might be expecting some more people to come back because of their status in society.
Yes.
Should we expect a harder, tougher line going forward of questioning?
I can assure you that where the evidence leaders have a basis for asking deeper questions, they will do so. And the rules of the commission make it quite clear that evidence leaders have a right to ask questions, including questions that seek to establish the truth in regard to a certain matter.
You have a mandate which was very clear in terms of what was gazetted when you were set up, but some people are already calling for your commission to expand its reach. I'm thinking of what ANC, NEC member Zizi Kotwa said last week about even the judiciary itself, that people are complaining about the judiciary. Maybe they must take their complaints to the Zondo Commission of Inquiry. Would you entertain something like that?
Well, one, it wouldn't be for me to entertain as such in terms of another inquiry. All I can do is what falls within the terms of reference. If it falls within the terms of reference, we would do it. But anything that falls outside the terms of reference, we can't do it. But for example, any members of the judiciary against whom there may be allegations and evidence and statements of corruption or being involved in state capture, they would also be called, particularly the judiciary. I would want to make sure that they are called to come and give evidence. There are members of, there is at least one member of the judiciary who was implicated by Mr. Agrizi, and he hasn't come forward, but it's very important that anybody who is in the judiciary, because that's a very important position in the country, should come and give evidence. And I've no doubt that where he is, he also wishes to be given a chance deal with this matter.
Now, Deputy Chief Justice, yesterday we saw another matter in court involving a separate commission. That was the Arms Deal Commission,
Yes.
the Security Commission, and I'm sure by now you're aware of its outcome, that they set aside the findings of that commission.
Yes.
We've had so many commissions in this country since the dawn of democracy in 1994, and many people sitting outside are wondering whether or not there will be practical consequences, you know, short of prosecutorial kind of consequence. People are also thinking of others.
Yes.
When you had the result yesterday of that panel, do you wonder if you could have, your commission might have the same fate, where people might take aspects of whatever you're going to find in the end and challenge it in court?
Well, I think that because of the types of issues that this commission is dealing with, and if one thinks of the kind of findings that may well be made, depending on the evidence, I would be very surprised if there wouldn't be people who want to challenge the outcome in courts. That is their right. But obviously, the way one goes about the work of the commission, one tries to make sure that, as far as possible, there would be no grounds for people to go to courts, or if they go to courts, they would not succeed. But, you know, we don't know. So ours must be to focus on doing the work properly, doing the work that's within our terms of reference, and making sure that we are, as far as possible, fair to everybody. There'll always be complaints, but we must focus on.
How will you, at the end of this, measure the success of this commission?
Well, I think that the success of this commission, well, firstly, will depend very largely on how it will have done its work. That's in part. And then, of course, in terms of society, it would also be the type of recommendations that it would have made. And the findings it will have made, the recommendations that it will have made, how useful will they be going forward? But thirdly, it would be what the president would do with its recommendations. Now, I know that the president has already said in the past publicly that he would implement the recommendations of the commission. So I think that from his part, he has committed himself to doing what needs to be done to make sure that the Commission's recommendations are effective.
Okay, there was a kind of a precedent in my words. I might be wrong.
Yes.
The Nugent Commission of Inquiry into SARS.
Yes.
Before it finalized its report, released preliminary findings.
Yes.
Can South Africans look forward to some preliminary findings from the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into state capture in the next year?
Well, put it this way. I've dealt with this, but it's important that we deal with it again. I would have liked to already have released some interim reports. But one has got to be careful. You see, the allegations of state capture and corruption, there are certain personalities who seem to have been allegedly involved in various, for example, various SOEs. You find that I might have had evidence relating to a particular SOE, and I might, by a certain time, be ready to give an interim report on that SOE. But because there are certain personalities who are implicated there, and in another SOE with which I haven't dealt with, if I were to make findings that could include, for example, credibility findings against those implicated persons, I would be disqualified from hearing evidence in regard to the other SOEs where they are allegedly involved. So I've got to be careful so that I don't reach a situation where there is a complaint that you can't continue to hear this because you have already made findings. So that's part of the problem. But we continue to have a look and say where we think we can make interim findings without jeopardizing what I'm talking about, then we would do that. Okay. But at this stage, it hasn't been so clear that we can do that.
You can do that. So you're going to have to weigh that up very carefully, when an opportunity arises.
Yes.
Now, let's take a look back in the past year. And I've just been wondering about this. And it's because I have you with me in the studio. Your team is quite big, your team, and they seem to be are having many sleepless nights. They spend a lot of time of reading through stuff and everything. Just yourself, I mean, how much time do you have to relax and sleep nowadays? Because your life has changed in the past year.
Yes, no. It's one works very hard, and you are right. The team works very hard. It's a team of very dedicated people, both in terms of the lawyers and in terms of the investigators and the secretariat, the personnel. They all work extremely hard. Well, in terms of my own work, yes, a lot has changed, but also, as Deputy Chief Justice of the country and as a judge in the Constitutional Court, there is a lot of work that one does there.
Do you still do that as well?
Not now,
okay.
But I'm saying the kind of hard work that I'm getting here is not something I'm not used to.
Okay.
It's something that I am used to. But, there is very little time for relaxation and so on, but sometimes one makes a little bit of time. But a lot of time goes into the commission work.
Anything that has surprised you in the past year that has come out? I mean, the country is literally on its knees economically, and we're hearing people coming there talking about millions there and millions there, people signing off a check on a Sunday for a transfer of millions, and the country is battling. The levels of poverty are big, and knowing your background as a person, I'm just wondering, when you're sitting, has there been anything that has shocked you, surprised you in the past year?
Well, without specifying which ones, I can assure you there have been quite a number of things that have really shocked me. I have really been shocked, and sometimes I look at ordinary people, and say, have we dealt with certain issues as society in the right way? What are ordinary people thinking when they hear about these kinds of things that the Commission is hearing? So certainly I have been shocked.
Any challenging issues that you've had to deal with, most challenging issues in the past year as you were carrying out this function?
Well, I think by and large, because one of the team that I have, and two, because of the general support that the country gives the Commission, including lawyers, there's been a lot of cooperation. And I dealt with certain issues, but there isn't something that I would really say it was very difficult, no. But maybe that's because a lot of people have shown us cooperation, shown us support, and I think a lot of people want this commission to succeed.
Are you surprised at that support that has come forth?
Well, maybe my answer would be, in a certain way, I expected that a lot of people would support this kind of commission, but that support has been much more than what I have expected. I said earlier in another interview that a few months ago, I was walking in a mall in Durban, and there was this couple, and they passed, and then the man recognized me and then told his wife, and the wife looked back and then walked back to me and said, "Are you Judge Zondo?" I said, "Yes." She said, "May I hug you, please?" And I said, "Yes." We hugged. That just shows a lot of support that people have. So it's much more than what I expected, and we appreciate it, but it places a lot of responsibility on us to make sure that we do our job, and as far as possible, we don't do anything that would disappoint the people.
That's a huge responsibility.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Now, safety issues, are there any safety issues for yourself and the team?
Well, put it this way, generally speaking, we have to be careful, and in certain cases, various measures have been taken. In others, there's room for improvement in terms of safety, but generally speaking, we are managing.
So you have some concerns, and are they being addressed?
I think that they are ongoing. There is a commitment to try and look at them, but generally speaking, things seem to be manageable.
Okay. Now, a year on, Deputy Chief Justice, I mean, you've explained that you sent out the Rule 33 invitations, notices, and people have responded, but there are those that you still want to come back. So, how would you look ahead? This coming year of the coming, what should South Africans look forward to, or what should they expect?
Well, one, they should expect to hear a lot of evidence from implicated persons. That's one. Two, there is still some further, what we call deeper investigation that is being done by the investigation team, forensic investigation, and certain things might be coming out of that. And we may be looking at making sure that all the important things that the public would probably want this commission to cover are covered. Obviously, always falling within our terms of reference.
And time-wise, can you accommodate all these other things in the allocated time?
Well, certainly. I mean, at the moment, we have our lifespan is up to the end of Feb next year. But we are going to have to apply to the High Court for an extension of time, because that's the route we have to go if we want an extension of time. I had hoped that maybe by August this year we would have finished oral evidence at least. That hasn't happened, and that's simply because with an investigation such as this, you can never be sure what investigators are going to find next week, next month. They might just find something very big which you didn't expect, which might require many witnesses. So your assessment is always affected by those uncertainties. So we are going to apply to the High Court in due course for an extension of time. I am hoping, and I think that we are, as a team, are going to try and aim to see whether we can finish the hearing of oral evidence at least by mid-year next year. And then hopefully after that it can just be the preparation of the report.
Okay, just to get an understanding, you're supposed to finish in February next year?
Yes.
You will be applying shortly to extend it to June next year?
Well, we might ask that it be extended to June, or might be applied that it be extended further. But in terms of the hearing of oral evidence, we might be able to finish around March, April, May, but I certainly wouldn't like it to go beyond June. That is now the hearing of oral evidence. But once that has happened, then there is the task of preparing the report. When I look at how long the other commissions have taken to prepare their reports after they had finished oral evidence, it seems that they take about 4 months, 6 months. And this being such a big commission, I think it might be realistic to think after the finishing of oral evidence, we might need to have about 6 months to prepare the report. But we are going to push to try and finish oral evidence within the first 6 months of next year.
Okay. A general question, although I would like to be specific, but you will take me to task for that, because you've said already you don't want to be specific.
Yes.
Of these prominent South Africans that we might see, those who are implicated, have some of them already been there, giving evidence, number one? Number two, is the former president among them?
Well, the former president, of course, has come and given evidence. And in terms of the agreement that was reached on the last day that he was before the commission, he is going to come back before the end of the year. He will come back. And there are other prominent South Africans. The current president has already said that he is committed to coming to the commission. I have said to him that I think that it will be important that he and other leaders of government and other senior leaders of the ANC may have to come and explain to the commission and to the nation what they knew, when they knew it, about state capture and what measures were taken to deal with it. And he has said he will lead the government delegation to give evidence to the commission, and I'm sure that the ruling party will do the same.
Mthiane, thanks for indulging me for such a long time. Let's end off by asking you the following question. Some people, I've seen commentary being made, all kinds of people are commenting about it, all South Africans are interested in this, are looking at your Commission of Inquiry as a form of a corruption TRC. You know, we've heard about Truth and Reconciliation Commission. and they are looking at these things going to come out, but there will be some consequences here and there. But overall, it's like we're bearing the soul of how money has fostered a culture of greed in this country instead of good. That's really what I'm seeing now. From your perspective, at the end of it all, how should South Africans view this whole journey that we've been going through, that we're still going to go through into a big part of next year?
Yes. Well, I look at this commission as, among other things, affording the South Africans the opportunity to look at themselves and say, where did we go wrong in relation to, for example, corruption? Because there can be no doubt that the levels of corruption in the country are very high. Then there is the question of allegations of state capture. To the extent that those allegations are substantiated, South Africans must have to look at themselves and say, where did we go wrong? And they need to look at how do we rectify that? How do we make sure that whatever it is that we didn't do right in the past, which has landed us where we are, is rectified so that this never happens again? Because with corruption, a lot of money that should be helping ordinary South Africans, helping South Africans and the country with problems that it has, gets taken away. That money should be helping all of us. And we have, after the commission, I hope that we will be able to come up with recommendations that will minimize at least the prospects that we could go through a similar situation in the future.
And hopefully the president who will be tasked to implement those recommendations will fulfill his part of the deal.
Thank you.
Tiana, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That's the Deputy Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, taking a look back at the year that has been for the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture, and also sharing some of his views about what's coming up. We've heard it here first that they will be applying for an extension soon of the Commission of Inquiry to go beyond February 2020.